to some of the core challenges in our country, and that is on the topic of immigration and the group of migrants who are coming to the U.S. border. About 5,000 migrants are on their way, and we've heard President Trump make statements saying that they will not be allowed in. Obviously, it's a major humanitarian crisis, and so I want to start with Tucker. How do we address this situation of people who are definitely suffering a lot, but also don't have visas to come in? How do we start to approach this situation?
Well, I mean, you have to create a hierarchy of imperatives. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here and in a room full of people who don't live in Washington with someone smart to talk to. And I'm going to really try to be as sort of civil and polite as I can, and maybe my mind will be changed, because in this world things are changing so fast. Why wouldn't your mind change? So maybe you can change my mind. I would say on the question of this group of migrants coming north, the one that came 3 months ago coming north, the 22 million who are currently living here illegally, it's all sort of species of the same question, which is the first question. I mean, there are many questions, and one of them is, how do you help other people? And a lot of smart people run NGOs are thinking about that in Washington, and some are doing a good job, others are not. But the main question the U.S. government has to answer is, how do we enforce our laws voted on democratically by our Congress? And how do we protect our people, the people to whom we have really the only duty that we have, right? I mean, the purpose of the government is to protect you and to help you. And again, I'm a Christian, and I think I'm a person of not particularly good faith, but decent faith, okay? So I'm always sort of for helping people, but the government's job is to represent the voters and enforce the laws that they sent their representatives to Washington to pass. And that's kind of all their job is, actually. So our law says that you need permission to come into this country, and that is the law of every country that is a country. And without that, you're sort of not a country. So, I mean, you could ask the obvious question, which is, there are an awful lot of poor people around the world. Does everyone have a right to come here and go on Medicaid? I don't know. I mean, if you think so, let's speak slowly so I can understand, and let's talk it through. And tell me why. Where does that obligation come from exactly? Is it written in the Constitution? Is it in the Bible? What exactly are you saying? But you're not hearing that. Instead, you're hearing an awful lot of the kind of moral bullying that has come to characterize all of our political conversations, where the person you're debating, in this case I'm debating, begins with the presumption of, I'm a better person than you. I care more deeply for these people than you do, and if you were a good person, you would agree with me. Well, I mean, that's a theological debate. And I reserve a huge part of Sundays for those. But that's not really a public policy debate. There isn't much of a public policy debate here. Our laws are as they are, and if you want to change them, send representatives to Washington and do that, and maybe we're about to see that happen. But there's a massive cost to any government saying, because of political pressure, temporary political pressure, we're going to ignore our own laws. Then why can't I ignore the law? I pay way more taxes than I feel like paying. There are all kinds of things that I would like to ignore. So I'm not really sure what the debate is. To be totally blunt with you, other than the virtue debate, which is not interesting.
Let's go to Cenk here.
Before we get that, I think Tucker just put that very succinctly, very precisely. He put it out there and said, look, are we going to be, the world's doormat? There are a lot of places around the world. There are billions of people that are suffering, billions of people that are hurting, billions of people that are in worse conditions than one could ever imagine. And they're all over the world. So what makes it okay for these people that just because they're on the southern border and they're coming up, why can they come over illegally? What's the reason for that? And he basically says, he's a charitable person. He wants to do what's right. But is that the job of the government, or is the job of the government to help Americans first? And to protect the borders and to make sure that people follow laws? That's really all that, he's saying. Now, let's hear what Cenk has to say in reply to that. And as Tucker was saying, it's not a racist question, but the presumption, he says, every time you talk to somebody about something like this, what do you get from the social justice warriors? What do you get from the wokesters? What do you get from the media? Hey, I'm up here on my high perch sitting there, and you guys are way down here, and I'm much better than you are. I'm more religious than you are. I care about these people more. I'm a deeply caring person. You're not. You're not religious. You don't give a damn about people. You're racist. You're bigoted. You're this. You're that. You're whatever. But we're so virtuous. We are so pious. We're so high and mighty up here. We're good people and you're not. That's basically what happens. That's where the conversation boils down to. Let's see what Cenk has to say.
Yeah. All right, so let's break it down. And backstage, we had far too much agreement, so let's break that up. So, first of all, on the caravan, I feel like Fox News, from time to time, touches on it, but overall misleads. And I'll tell you why, Tucker. It makes it sound like the caravan's going to come in and bust through a gate of some sort and then go ravaging in the country. Well, the reality is, the reason they're in a caravan is because they're seeking asylum. So if they wanted to sneak into the country, they wouldn't do it in a giant caravan. So, and so when you're talking about the laws, there are also laws in place on how to seek asylum. And that is exactly what they're following. So that caravan actually, in a way, should be celebrated because they are not going to cross the border illegally. They are going to go to a port where you ask for asylum. Now, Donald Trump is suggesting that we should reject asylum out of hand without talking to people. Now, that is not the law, and that is not the American way. And so, and Tucker, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to compare you or Fox News or anybody to this. I'm just giving an extreme example of what happens when you don't listen to people. So we've done that in the past. In the 1930s and 40s, Jews came here on boats asking for asylum, and we sent them back. And one particular ship that came to Florida that was sent back, 25% of those people were murdered in a concentration camp. And God knows what happened to the other 75%. There's sometimes a good reason to hear them out. And what we're asking for is something very simple, and that is within the law, hear them out. It's not too much to ask for.
So, all right, so Cenk basically, again, now a lot of times people throw in the Nazi metaphors, then people throw in the Jewish metaphors, then people throw in whatever other people's plights metaphor there are. So Cenk is basically saying that, look, he's looking at it from an asylum point of view. Well, you know what? That's fine and good in a way if you want to think about it. But the reason that these folks have an easy way, and I mean easy is relative in terms of seeking asylum, is because they are able to cross on foot or whatever caravan, whatever means of transportation those guys are using to come to the United States. But they're able to do that because of the land mass that's available. They have the ground beneath their feet that they can move. Immigration, you vote with your feet, legal or illegal. And they're using their feet. They're using a caravan to come forward. So the asylum is good for all those people from Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, all these other places. But what about all the people that want to seek asylum that are, like, say, in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Iran, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in China, in other countries, in sub-Saharan, in Africa? What about those places? Bosnia, Ukraine, Russia, any place out there. Third world countries, fourth world countries. Where do they go for seeking asylum? Are they to be, they can't be rewarded because of where they are in terms of geographical boundaries? Is that what we're talking about? Because they just happen to have to cross a body of water, or they're thousands and thousands of miles away and they can't reach the shores of the United States of America, so they're punished because of geographical boundaries? I mean, this is unbelievable. I don't know really who won the debate. I mean, there's going to continue, obviously, on this immigration. But right now, I don't think there was a clear winner. They stated their positions and they came through. I think Tucker had a point, basically saying government's job is to basically help the United States citizens and protect our borders and protect U.S. citizens first. I don't think this is an asylum issue. It's a protection and border issue. So on that, I would probably give a little bit to Tucker. Let's continue.
I'll let the whole Nazi reference go unremarked upon. But I would say, look, if I have one criticism of Americans is they haven't traveled enough. And I know you have traveled a lot, and one thing you learn when you travel is there are a lot of really hurting parts of the world. So nothing that is happening in Guatemala right now, or Honduras, or Salvador, is unique to those countries, or even to Central America, Latin America, or even this hemisphere. That kind of thing is happening all
Bingo.
over the world, where for a bunch of different reasons, most of them political, millions upon millions, billions, in fact, of people are suffering and desperate. And of course, my heart goes out to all of them. The question is, what duty does the U.S. government have to them?
Yes.
And I would argue it doesn't have a duty to them, okay? It has a duty to its own people. Now, that's not, again, I think people of goodwill have a lot they can do to help those people, okay? I do think that. But the government is something very different. And I would also argue that there is a cost to this, a cost that the left used to recognize. It was once obvious. So I grew up in this state in Southern California, and Cesar Chavez was a hero. I mean, we have a day in California dedicated to his memory. And Cesar Chavez, among many other things, he was a serious leftist, an economic leftist, he was a socialist. But among many other things, he was passionately, in fact, violently anti-immigration. Why? Because he was anti-Mexican? I mean, he was of Mexican descent, of course not. Because he led a labor union, and he understood that supply and demand is a real thing. And if you have an overabundance of anything, its value falls. That's why sand is cheap. So if you let people in from poor countries willing to work for less, your wages fall, particularly at the bottom end, among your most vulnerable. This was axiomatic on the left for 100 years. All of our anti-immigration laws were the result of lobbying from organized labor, from Democrats, because they had a responsibility to their people. And Republicans, management, the people who owned the fruit companies, who hired the pickers, were totally for unrestrained immigration, legal and illegal, because it made their labor costs lower. So I would only say, and it's a more complicated question than just this, but this is a huge part of it. It's one of the reasons that wages have stalled. And for some categories of people, high school educated people, they've gone down over the last 30 years. Like, this is a real thing. And the last thing I'll say is if you bring this up, everyone wants to make a race question out of it. You don't like them because they're different. Oh, please. There's nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what kind of country you want to live in. Do you want to live in a country where people with very little economic power have even less? Then open the doors, and that's what you'll get.
All right, so a lot to respond to there. So let's break it down one by one. First of all, this is a country, and this is not a cliche, it's true, this is a country made of immigrants. I'm an immigrant, and I came in a legal way. So, and I want to support that, and I think that that's not a matter of doing me a favor, it's not a matter of doing someone from Honduras a favor, it's a matter of what is best for the country. And I think immigrants have built this country, whether they were Italian, Irish, Chinese, Jewish, and Mexican. Yes, they have built this country. And so I think that is a great value to the country. In fact, there is demagoguery about how immigrants keep taking from us. But the reality is, and every study shows this, since a lot of the undocumented immigrants pay into Social Security and Medicare as part of the payroll taxes, but never get it out, they actually put more taxes into the system than they take out of the system.
I just have to stop right here basically and say that when Cenk basically says that, immigration, they put more into the system than take out, that's absolutely wrong. So what does that mean? If they put more into the system, then what we should be basically doing is, hey, the whole world come to the United States of America, and you can put so much more into the Social Security system. You can put so much into the system, paying more taxes and whatever. That's the best thing. That's completely wrong what Cenk is saying. Okay, they're paying their taxes, they're doing whatever they're doing, they're putting in the system, but look in terms of schooling, healthcare, other costs that are affiliated with this in terms of just the, just in terms of where they are getting benefits. In many cases, they are getting Medicare benefits. They are getting welfare benefits. They are doing that thing. And this whole thing there, and how much money are they, sending back to their countries to help there? Instead of spending that money here, stimulating the economy here, they're sending it back to their home countries. Don't tell me this thing here.